He said he would be late tonight. I guess he had some sort of conference. I now found out Mamish at the bottom. 141. Al-Daita Rabbi Lezer, the last line at the period. Al-Daita Rabbi Lezer, according to Rabbi Lezer, now Rabbi Lezer said, just a review outside, the question is, what's the status of a girl who's married off by her brother or by her mother? And of course, it's only a rabbinic kiddushin. So Rabbi Lezer says she's not married at all, except to that in order to leave the marriage, she has to repudiate the marriage. But no normal rights which a husband has over a wife does her husband have over her. Not the right to annul her vows, not the right to inherit her, not any of those rights. She has none of those regular rights. Okay, so but according to Rabbi Yoshua, the husband has full rights over her of a regular husband, except that she can leave him, even though normally only a husband can divorce his wife. In this case, she can also repudiate him. So the question is it a full marriage except for the miyun, or is it no marriage except for the miyun? Okay? So Korah says no marriage except for the miyun. Mao, it's a cool question. More, of course, will not answer such a cool question. Mao Shetimoimba, can she repudiate his marriage and say, well, since I wasn't married to you, then in essence, when you had relations with me, you were seducing me. And a seductionist has to pay a fine for having seduced an unmarried young girl, right? So can she repudiate marriage to him and then say, pay me for having had relations with me, right? And that's true. That's true even if he didn't have relations. Well, it's not clear if that's for relations which he had with her at the time they were still married, but certainly for relations after married, that's the Gemara's question. Now, Daita Rabbi Yeshua, according to Rabbi Yeshua, we just did one line. Daita Rabbi Yeshua, according to Rabbi Yeshua, on top of 142. Daita Rabbi Yeshua says it's a full marriage except for miyun. So therefore, if the husband has relations with the ketana, so then for sure he doesn't have to pay the fees, right, of seducer. But can she repudiate the marriage to him and then tito knas miacher take a fine from somebody else if she's still a basula, right? She's still a virgin at the time. So can she then collect fines from somebody else on the premise that she never was married, so she repudiated, and therefore she deserves fines if she's seduced? Another interesting question. Let's say that she got divorced from her husband. Can she retroactively repudiate the marriage and say, well, it's as if she never got divorced, and thus be permitted to go subsequently and marry a Kohen? Or does that not work? The next two words, Chalol Mamzeres, are incorrect. They shouldn't be here. Rabbi Yitzchak Shoal, can she repudiate her marriage, and then go back to eat in her father's house? Now, pshita she'ena choseres l'mazonos bala. Now, it's obvious that she doesn't go back to be fed by her husband. Now, it's not this that she doesn't go back to be fed by her husband. What it means is that she doesn't get ksuva from her husband. If a girl does miyun, right, normally, if she gets divorced or widowed, she gets a ksuva. If she gets widowed, she even gets food as long as she doesn't go and remarry. But in this case, since she repudiated her marriage, so obviously she can't get any ksuva or any mazonos from him, right? The only time she gets mazonos after marriage is terminated, or is when yes.
Be quiet.
No, just those doors. That's my old buddy, right? So it's when he writes that when you're in my house, so then you get my food. For Lacey Bason, obviously she's not his house, and therefore she doesn't get mizonos nor ksuva, right? But lo tzur chada ella, the question is only once she repudiates him, can she tachsam mizonos havia? Can she go back? Of course, her father's dead, otherwise she wouldn't be married off. Although there are scenarios which follows the lie, but generally it means can she go back to her father's house and claim her portion in mizonos? And the Gemara doesn't answer any of these questions. Okay, now the Gemara goes into a really interesting discussion. Tuesdays is really a bad day. I really want to look up, generally speaking, because Actually, I don't have time to do on Tuesdays, but I have to do the rest of the week usually. But so I have to look up some lumdus on this Gemara, because really the next Gemara, the next plot is a really very beautiful lumdus or Gemara, but I didn't get a chance to look in the Achronim and see if they speak about it. So, but just the flow is very simple and very elegant. Time of today, we learned over there. Katan shloivi shtei saros, a child who never has not yet reached maturity of 2 hairs. Rabbi Yehuda mer truma so truma. Rabbi Yehuda says his truma, if he takes truma, it's valid truma. Tani b'shem Rabbi Meir. Their name Rabbi Meir ain't lo made truma so truma. Truma's not valid truma ad shliyevi shtei saros until he has 2 hairs. Okay, so we have a machlokas whether a katan can take truma. Now, of course, there must be a reason for this machlokas, right? Let me come back to that in a minute, okay?
Aren't they saying the same thing, only in different words?
No. Rabbi says you can take truma, Rabbi says you can't take truma.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You can't take truma.
Yeah.
Rabbi Avi Kahana, b'shem Rabbi Hila said, what's the pasuk? It says, v'lotiso love chait. It says, do not bear iniquity on your trumas. Eshu b'nesiyas avan, somebody could bear iniquity, toirem, he can take off truma. Eshu eino b'nesiyas avan, somebody cannot bear iniquity because he's not yet bar mitzvah. Eino toirem, he can't take truma. So it says, the Gemara, Sivun ask a question on this, wait a minute. A goy, an akum, hare eino b'nesiyas avan, he does not bear iniquity. At least not in the same way that Jews do, right? In other words, he doesn't have a chait for eating truma, right? If he doesn't, not supposed to. The Jews do, but not goy. So, eino for the Torah, and we learned there's a halacha that a goy can't take off truma. There is such a halacha. You take off truma, it's considered to be truma. So, how come if he can't, he's not, of course, take up truma. But he takes the truma, it's considered to be truma. How come he's not relevant to the punishment? So it says Rabbi Yossi B'Shari said, no, you're right. The pasuk is not the one of Nesiyas Avam, but rather v'nechshav lochem trumaschem. It says nechshavchem b'arei mosem. It says that it should be considered for you, and you should lift up truma. Eshekasu b'machshava, he who has thought can be toirim. V'she'en kasu b'machshava, he has no thought process, ain't no toirim, can't do truma. So who doesn't have thought process? Katan, right? Can't. He is not a bar machshava. So Esivun asks question: Hare goyim, hare ein kasu b'machshava. Goyim don't have thought. For Torah, you take out truma. Now, it's not what you think. It's not what you think. Well,
it says it's goyish shekav.
It's goyish shekav, right?
It doesn't say ein machshava. It says ein kasum.
Ein kasum machshava. All right, ein kasum machshava. But we learned. What does it mean? Torah Rav goyim ein la machshava bein la hachshir bein la truma. What it means is they can't make something royal kabel tuma. Right, machshava normally, if you, in order to make something royal kabel tuma, so you have to be agreeable to it becoming wet or moist, right? So goyim don't have that capacity to have that thought, because goyim are not b'teiras, they're not in the parameters of tuma and tara. So that's what it means, ein lehem machshava. Oh. It's not that the goyim don't have thought of tuma and tara. Okay, so therefore, a guy should not be able to take off truma, yet he can't take off truma. So he says, actually, when Rabbi Yoshi give me an answer, he says they have machshava, they just don't have machshava. What does it mean, machshava? Oh, so I didn't notice that before when I was prepared. The carbon 8 says bein l'truma means that they can't take off truma by thought. They have to verbalize their truma. In other words, a Jew can designate truma mentally, right? He can designate truma with his mentally. A goy has to designate truma verbally. So they have no machshava, both lahachshir and l'truma. Rabbi Yaakov bar Chinim Shem Kahana said, "Kedivrei mishu oimer eino torim." He says that a katan cannot take off truma, can also not be mekadesh, an animal for the Beis Hamikdash. It's an interesting contingency. So it says the Gemara, "V'lama lo amar kamishu toirem Makdish. Why doesn't he say, the flip side of that he who holds a katan can take out truma, holds that a katan also can be makdish an animal. So it says, I'll tell you why not. Begin to Rabbi Yehuda Omar, but it says, turn ve'ena makadish. A child can take out truma, but he can't make something hektish. So it's an interesting thing. Truma, we would think that truma and hektish should be the exact same parameters, but it seems it's not. Truma is actually, the Gemara seems to say, is more of like a kinyan. And a child can make a kinyan earlier than he can make nedarim. A hektish is a neder. A child's nedarim, only nedarim the rights a year before his bar or bas mitzvah, right? A child's mekach memkar is considered to be valid purchase and sale earlier than that, from around the age of 6 or 7. So therefore, truma may be earlier than hektish. If you hold truma and hektish are linked, so then you hold that they're both nedarim and they both start later. If you hold they're severed from each other, it's because truma is really being makne, giving for being makne to a Kohen. Have to be done not in the normal way we do kinyanim, but it's being makne to a Kohen, and therefore it really actually might be able to be done earlier than the time you can take off hektish, and that's what the Gemara is stressing here. That is Mandamar holds that even though he's toirem, ain't a mekadesh, right? Okay, says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, "Afilu Mandamar ain't no toirem mekadesh." The exact opposite. Even he who holds a cotton can't be toirem. He can't be mekadesh. What does that mean? He can't be mekadesh. Not that he can't be mekadesh anything. Mal mekadesh, he can be mekadesh. Oilod shlomim, that he can give, because oilod shlomim are not contingent on any antecedents, right? However, lahavi chatas chelev ein yochel. He can't bring a chatas which is brought for an avera such as eating chelev. Shein lo chatas chelev. He doesn't have chatas chelev. Why doesn't he have chatas chelev? It's not bar mitzvah, right? He doesn't have sins, right? Similarly, chatas tam ain't a yochel. Same idea. Chatas profane blood he can't. Shein lo chatas tam. He doesn't have chatas tam. Mao shiyavi carbon ziva carbon tzaraz. But here's a cool question: can he bring the carbon of a zav or mitzayra? So now?
Well, if he's not physically mature, he wouldn't be about.
No, he can be from the age of 9. He could be a zav, right? We said he can be miyabe from the age of 9, right? At least according to one opinion. Mao shiyavi carbon ziva carbon tzaraz. Miachashu choiva maybe, since it has to, it's a chiyuv, it's an obligation on the zavar mitzvah to bring carbon, and he's not a bar mitzvah. He's not a bar chiyuva. Or miachashu metame, since I say his body can actually become physically tameh in saras or in ziva, so maybe he's allowed to bring. Of course, you knew that the Gemara is not going to answer that. But the Gemara does going to say, Gemara does, in all fairness, continue on from this point. Even though it says the word kuti here, the word kuti here is totally mistaken. The Bnei Moshe takes it out. The Mashbiach says that it should have said, it's an abbreviation. It should be ki. It should be, instead of kuti tifshot, kshuti pshitlach, it should be ki tifshotlach. And it's the same thing, saying intim tzeloimer. Right? If you're going to say shumevi, if you're going to say that a cotton can't bring a carbon if he comes to Zav Mitzvah, Maushi Asa ben Shliach. Cool case. Can he be a Shliach to bring a carbon for Zav Mitzvah? Me'achashu metame ben nasa shliach. Do I say since he is metame, so there become a shliach, right? Because that means that he's involved in that capacity, and therefore he can become a shliach on behalf of his mitzvah. Or me'achashu eno nasa shliach l'chol advarim, since he can't become a shliach for anything else, because cotton doesn't have normally principles of shlichus. Because shlichus has to do with the capacity to become an agent, and only an adult can become an agent. So therefore, since he can't become a shliach for anything else, he can't become a shliach to bring the carbon as well. Now I'm not sure, to be honest, even though we learned through Gotcha already in the Bavli, I don't remember offhand what the shliach of a carbon would do. Maybe it does smicha on the carbon, maybe it does the vidui. I don't remember what the shliach does, which is anything more than bringing the animal to the Beis HaMikdash. Of course, if it was just bringing the animal to the Beis HaMikdash, you could send it through a conveyor belt. You don't even have to have a trial doing it. But there must be something which the shliach does, which is bothering the Gemara. Can he be a shliach on this carbon because he could bring carbon zav or mitzvah, or can't he be in the shliach because he's not shaykh the shlichus, generally speaking, of any sort? Okay? But in any event, the Gemara, of course, doesn't answer. Hey, so Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda asks a question like this: Hareish lo tevel dvar Torah. Look, a katan if he has crop, so it's tevel d'oraisa, right? It's truly non-tight. It can't be eaten until it's tight, right? And Pnei Moshe puts in the word eino here. Eino poter tivlo dvar Torah. Even though he has tevel d'oraisa, he can't exempt his tevel by taking off truma d'oraisa. So he holds that he can't, at least he can't at all times take truma. Question is at what stage in his career it can begin. But if a cotton owns land from his youngest age, even before he can take off truma, the land produces crop, which is tevel, even though he himself is not, conscious or involved or yet a bar mitzvah in any way, shape, or form. But nonetheless, his land produces tevel, right? So here too I can say, I will be shumitami bohen, even though it becomes tummy, because that's a chefta, that's, I don't know if I want to use chefta gavra here, but you understand?
I'm going to.
Yeah, okay, you could. But you understand that that's happening, which happens to his body. It's not him as a gavra becoming tummy, it's him as a chefta. You know the Brisker joke, when is the I'm sure I've told this to you. How do you tell a person is dead? What's the definition of death in halacha?
Stop breathing.
When a gavra becomes a chefza. Okay? When he ceases to be a man, becomes an object. So here, it's his body as object which becomes tummy, not he as a person becomes tummy. So therefore, he can't become a shliach to bring a korban for somebody else's tummy, because that would imply that he has actually bar chiyuva, bar mitzvah characteristics which he doesn't have yet. So therefore he says you can't become a shliach. Okay, Ma'ushavi Bikurim. Can a cotton bring Bikurim from his field? Krabira, the Rabbi Yehuda, like Rabbi Yehuda, the Rabbi Yehuda Amar, the Rabbi Yehuda said, Hukshu l'kachi agvul, Bikurim are like Truma, meaning things which have parameters of Kedusha outside the base of Mikdash, Einovevi. He can't bring Truma, right? Because he can't bring Truma, so he can't bring Bikurim either. He can't separate Truma, so he can't bring Bikurim, right? But Rabbanan like Rabbanan who say that it's like the kachim the base on Mikdash Bikurim because it's brought to the base on Mikdash. Maybe he can bring it. This is going like Rabbi Yochanan said before, that even though he can't make truma until he's an adult, nevertheless he can make hekdesh already from the time that he is 12 years old. So also he can make Bikurim from earlier than he can make truma as well, because Bikurim is like a korban. Says the Gemara, Ma'ushavi Chagiga. Well, connection between the Bavli and Yerushalmi. Can he bring a korban chagiga? I just realized this morning, it hit me all of a sudden, it was like a ton of bricks, to be honest with you, that we're going to be finishing Yevamos Yerushalmi and starting Yevamos Bavli around the same time. And cumulatively it's going to be like a half a year Yevamos straight. So that is an ordeal, to be honest. Okay, so in any event, so he says, can he bring a chagiga? Since it's a mitzvah to bring chagiga, he's not relevant to mitzvahs. Interesting question, very interesting question. If a chagiga can default down to a shlamim, right? If it wasn't brought as chagiga on Yontif, so it defaults down to regular shlamim, a regular voluntary korban after Yontif, which you don't have to be a bar chiyuva to bring. Rabbi Yochanan said before on Ayin Alpha base that even a katan can bring a shlamim. He can't bring korbanos which require being a bar chiyuva, a bar mitzvah, but he can bring korbanos which are optional ones. So chagiga is a mandatory korban. As a mandatory korban, he couldn't bring it. But perhaps since it could default down to Shlomi, maybe you can bring it, or maybe not. Now, again, it says kuti, but it should be kitiv shok lochshu maybe, and even if you can say you can bring a chagiga because in default down, ma'ushavi pesach. Can you bring korban pesach? Since it's mandatory, ein maybe, can you not bring it? Or me'achar do amar b'shem Eloy, so B'shem Eloy said b'shem Rabbi Yeshua, named Rabbi Yeshua, that the Pesach can default down, maybe other Pesach Shai Moshe Shana, you can bring in case of the other time of the year, Mishanei L'Shem Shlamim, and default down to Shlamim, maybe can you bring that? And the Gemara doesn't answer that as well. Ma'u Shavi Ma'aser Behema, can you bring a Ma'aser Behema? You remember Ma'aser Behema is every 10th animal which comes out of your pen, right? Ma'u Shavi Ma'aser Behema, in Yisbar, if he holds Krabi Meir, The Rameir Amar, like the Rameir said, Mikom Asosechem, from all of your maisros, you bring up to Yerushalmi, and that's prul. Hukshu maisros zelazeh. There's a linkage drawn between the two types, all the types of maisros. So that means that the meiser of animal is like the meiser of grain. And the meiser of grain, we know already, according to Rabbi Yochanan, he can't take until he's a full adult. Right? Bear in mind, I should have made this clear earlier, 9 alphabets. We have we have all possible shitas. One that he could take truma before he can make things hektish. The other that they happen simultaneously, and the other that he can make hektish before truma. And Rabbi Yochanan is going like the shita. He can make hektish right by the time he's 12, but truma, since it's a chiyuv, right? So therefore he can't make it until the time is bar mitzvah. Okay? So we're going the whole time with that shita. So if you hold a meiser behema is linked to regular meiser, so kashem sheina mevi meiser dogon, just like he can't bring meiser of grain, kach leina mevi meiser behema, so too he can't bring meiser behema. Alright? Ma'ushi asked the Tmura. This is a very interesting question. I found this fascinating. Ma'ushi asked the Tmura, can a cotton make Tmura? Right? I know this sounds painful, but it's not that painful. Ma'ashi has in Yisbar Kraimer, so it's interesting. Of course, what do we know? We only know Chumash when it comes up in the Gemara, right? But the pasuk which talks about Tmura is in the same pasuk which speaks about Meiser Behema. Okay? So therefore, the Gemara's question is there a linkage between Tmura and Meiser Behema, right? So if he said, so once you discuss Meiser Behema, so we go on to Tmura, it's a natural progression. Ma'ashi has a Tmura in Yisbar Kraimer, he goes like Rameir, Dari Komasru Seichem, who says from all your Meisres, Hukshu Meiser Zelazeh, all the Meisers are linked. Kishem Shena Mevi Meiser, doesn't just say he doesn't bring Meiser of grain, Kachena Mevi Meiser Behema, so he can't bring Meiser Behema. Kishem Shena Mevi Meiser Behema, and then the next step is just like he can't bring Meiser Behema, Kach Eno is Tmura. And he does so too, he can't make Tmura. For Yisbar with one caveat. That's assuming Yisbar Rabbi Shimon, he goes like Rabbi Shimon, Damar Meiser Behema, who says that the Tmura written by Meiser Behema, from there you extrapolate, you derive Limed al Kol HaKodshim, that all other Kodshim also Litzmura, that you can't do Tmura on them either. Kishem Shena Mevi Meiser Dogon, Kachenu Mevi Meiser Behema, so you can't do Meiser of grain, you can't do Meiser of an animal. Kishem Shenu Mevi Meiser Behema, so you can't do Meiser Behema, so Kachenu sits where you can't do Tmura as well. And Kishem, next step, I'm sorry, skipping the parentheses. Kishem Shenu Meimer Bo, and since it's just like you can't do Tmura in the end, Meiser Behema, Kachenu Meimer al B'kol HaKodshim, so he doesn't do Tmura by all other Kodshim as well. What if a cotton made something hektish, and then somebody slaughtered it outside the Beis HaMikdash? Right? If it was an adult who made hektish, it should be chayav koris, right? So what about in this case? So it says, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shimon, Lagish Tarveno, they both said, chayavin al kotcha, I skipped it. Kahana Amar, ein chayav al kotcha chutz. Rav Kahana holds, no, his hektish is not valid enough that if somebody slaughters his hektish out Beis Mikdash chayav koris. Rabbi Yochanan Shimon Lakish Tarvei they both said Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish chayav and Kosher b'chutz who are liable on his kosher out to the Beis Hamikdash. The Kashid Rav Kahana Rabbi Yehuda. I got a question for or Rav Kahana's question Rabbi Yehuda or based on Rabbi Yehuda. The Rabbi Yehuda poter tivul dvar Torah. Rabbi Yehuda says that if a cotton takes of truma, it works d'oraisa. Even on tevel d'oraisa it works. So how come he can't make something hektish in order to make it chayav and shchutei chutz, to make you liable if you slaughter outside Beis Hamikdash? If you hold, you can make, according to Rabbi Yehuda, if you hold, you can make something truma, surely you should be able to make it hektish.
Are there any cases where any child is chayav koris for any of it?
No, it's not him. If he makes something hektish, somebody else and slaughters it outside the Beis Hamikdash. It's the other guy, chayav koris, on him.
Really hektish.
Right, that's what's about. So it says, no, that's not a question. Because Command Amar, could be that Rabbi Yehuda says that he paters tevel not the raisa, but like the opinion which we know about nowadays, Command Amar to me'alem kibul aleim as meisers, that nowadays meisers is only the rabbanim. We accept upon ourselves. That's the way it works.
You know, it's similar to the woman that the girl that made miyun. Was that marriage really a real marriage? Right, it's the same.
Right, it's a similar idea. That's probably why it's brought down here. Yeah. The same thing as miyun. The kasha Rabbi Yochanan as Rabbi Yoshua. And that's why we go back to miyun over here. The kasha Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Yoshua. The Gemara. By the way, that was a blot. Do you remember any easier blot in Yevamos? Yeah, very smooth. The kasha Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Yoshua. The kasha Rabbi Yochanan has the kasha on Rabbi Yoshua. Nisuah to Rabbanan. Right? Her marriage is definitely to Rabbanan. This woman this girl is being married off as a minor by her brother or by her mother, her marriage is the rabbinic marriage, right? Well, Hafarish Nedarim is Doraisa. Ha'ifan Nedarim is Minat Torah. And you're going to say that the husband, according to Rabbi Yeshua, can annul the vows of his minor wife who's married, to whom he's only married the Rabbanan? How could that work? Right? We had that tonight. We had that last night. So how does it work? If Haven some Rabbi said you're right. Lace kind of fair Nedarim to delete here Hafer Afaris Nedarim. Min Ador Rabbi Yochanan al Ador Rabbi Yeshua for Rabbi Yochanan's question Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Nisa, however, an interesting name, I don't remember from anywhere. Rabbi Nisa asked, V'yekem basuros. Very interesting and funny thing. I don't remember this at all from the Bavli. He says there are two different types of Nedarim. There's one neder of neder hekdesh. There's another neder which I say, let something become usher on me, right? We call konamos or isure in kol nidre, right? Kol kinu kinmev chinev kinu save, all those terms we use. So isure are like konamos. When I say I want to be mudra, no, I don't want to have any benefit. So he wants to say that Rabbi Yochanan draws a dichotomy. Rabbi Yochanan ain't looking at asuros. Even a cotton can make nedarim d'oraisa, which is from the time a year before bar mitzvah. It's not nedarim where they bar themselves from deriving benefit or pleasure from something. It's only nedarim to give things to the Beis HaMikdash. So the husband can annul the vows which are personal, barriers on one's person, right?
Obligations.
No, it's not obligations. Restrictions. Which says I should be also about no on yanko, all right? Or I shouldn't have any on off a certain chair, right? So that type of thing is not like a neder of hektish, and therefore that he can annul. The it's like that we learned over there. Before this time, in other words, before their year before bar mitzvah. Even though they say we know for whom we made the neder for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's about hektish. U'l'shem mikdashnu, and for whose purpose we made something hektish. Any dream the dorim ben hektish and hektish, it's not valid neder nor valid hektish. After that time, I guess neder here is an obligation. Anyway, that type of neder doesn't work before they're 12 or 13, 11 or 12, depending on the girl or boy. After this time, when they're a year before their mitzvah, they said, no, we're stupid. We don't know, right? To whom we took the neder. Or l'shem mikdashnu, or for whom we made hektish. Nidreim, nedarim, the nedarim, valid nedarim, hektish and hektish, and their hektish is valid hektish. So this is supposed to be a raya that the only nedarim which work are nedarim which are obligations. Obligating an animal to the Beis HaMikdash. Committing to give somebody something. Supposed to yisurim which are not valid nedarim even within that last year. Okay, so those are valid only to Rabbanan, and therefore the husband can annul those vows. So what about this brisa that says that nidrei hekdesh are mamish nedarim, which we just learned? According to Rav Kahana, this is not necessarily so, because Rav Kahana said on Amud Aleph that you're potter and kotche kotan bachutz, right? If a kotan makes something hekdesh, and then it's slaughtered outside Beis Hamikdash, whoever slaughtered it is not chayav koris. So he can't hold that in the didre hekdesh of a cotton are valid, because if they were mamish valid, then when the cotton makes something into a carbon and slaughtered outside, the person should be chayav koris. But he has totally argues on this brisa. However, it can work according to everybody that it can be a valid form of hektish d'oraisa, and that's why if a cotton is marked as something and somebody else slaughters it, he's chayim. The person slaughters chayim and shchutei. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer. Back to full-time meal here. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer. Kol ikva shemena ish. Now, the Mishnah actually is going to explain in Mishnah Daled, Halacha Daled, it's going to give scenarios explaining Mishnah Gimel. But basically it means, if she's the one who causes, if he's the one who causes the marriage to be rent asunder, meaning by giving a get. Now, it's talking about a minor who was married up by her brother or her mother. So it's all the Rabbanan. But if he rends the marriage asunder, ikva means an impediment to the marriage from the man. Kilu ishlo, it's as if she was his wife, and therefore she's pasal lakuna. right? She can't marry a Kohen afterwards because she's a divorcee. Because he initiated divorce before she got a chance to repudiate. But if it's not from him, but rather from her, because she repudiated marriage, Kilu Ena Ish, so it's as if she never was his wife, and therefore she's not rendered unfit for Kohanim, right? Because as if there was never any marriage. He just explains what I just said. Elizabeth Yaakov says, anything which comes to the man, Kilu Ish, so it's as if it's his wife. That's why about where he gives a get. Something which is not from the wife, though, so if she was never his wife, that's why about B'miyunim, where she repudiates the marriage. Then immediately the Mishnah explains that even greater extent. Hamaenes Mish, a woman who does miyun against a man, he's allowed to marry her relatives, she's allowed to marry his relatives, even his brother, right? Even her sister, as if they were never married to each other because she repudiated. She's not paslakuna. Nosan la get, but if he gave her a get, despite the fact that it was a rabbinic marriage, right? Who also be krovoseh? He's not allowed to marry her relatives. He also be krov. She's not allowed to marry his relatives. She's not allowed to marry Kohen because she's a divorcee. Nosan la get v'yachzir. Now here's a fascinating variation on the theme, one you never expect. Unless you learned Yevamos before, and if you learned 7.5 years ago, you had enough time to forget. Nosan get. He gave her a get. Okay? First time around. So now she should be also lakuna. But then love conquers all. He took her back. The second time, mi'anabo, she does miyun. Okay, so they're married twice. First one ended with a get, the second one ended with a miyun, right? V'nises la'acher. Now she married somebody else, right? Another party. And then she gets widowed or divorced from the second party. Muteres lachzor, she's allowed to go back to the first guy. That's a very big chiddush, because if Reuven divorces his wife and then she marries Shimon, and divorces him, she's not allowed to go back to Reuven, right? But here she was divorced by her first husband. But since that divorce was followed by remarriage and then by miyun, we go after the miyun, and it's as if they were never married, and that's why she can go back. But not vice versa. If the opposite case occurred, which is miyanabo, first there was miyun, then ichzira, then the same husband took her back. V'nosel again, and this time he doesn't like her, and then she gets divorced. V'nisis lach, and then she marries somebody else. V'nisam lo, and he's garshon, she comes amona or grusha. Then asur lachzor lo, then she can't go back to the first guy, because it all depends. In the last time she severed the relationship with him, how did she sever the relationship, right? Zeh klaus, the general principle. Get achamiyun, if it's a get after miyun, asur lachzor lo, she's not allowed to go back to him. If she marries somebody else after that. Miyun achar get, if there was a miyun after the get, muteres lachzor, she's allowed to go back to him, even if she married somebody else after that. Rabbi Yochanan, b'shem Rabbi Yanai said, when there's just miyun, ein bo mishum ziyum kehuna, she's not rendered stinky for Kohanim. Vein based in Mizam, so I'm based in not repudiate her. In other words, she can go marry a Kohen, as opposed to the next case. Hama'enes bish, so she does miyun, okay? V'nises la'acher, that she married somebody else. V'girsha, the second guy, divorced her. La'acher, that she married a third guy, u'miyanabo, and she did miyun on the third guy. La'acher, then she married a fourth guy, and did gerushin on the fourth guy. La'acher, then she married a fifth guy, and she was mimayenes in him, right? She's a really mixed up kid. Kol she is all when she was a minor, mind you, right? Kol she yatzis men get, all the guys she got to get from, asur lachzor lo, she can't go back to them. Because then it's as if she was grusha and married somebody else, so she can't go back to the original husband. But miyun, the guys she left with miyun, muteres lachzor lo, she can go back to them, because as if she was never married to them, and therefore subsequent marriages do not render her unfit. Rabbi Yochanan b'shem Rabbi Yanai said, "Ein bo mishum ziyum kahuna bein based in mizamin bo." Anytime here it's a much bigger chiddush. Anytime miyun comes at the end, even though she was divorced previously, she can still marry a Kohen. Because we always go here after the last rending asunder of a marriage. So therefore, the last was a miyun, despite the fact that again previously she can marry a Kohen based on this not prevention.
So she's not tainted from previous marriage.
Not tainted from previous marriage because they're all when she was a ketana. So all it goes is kedusha ketana. Right. However, it's a little bit, the gears is a little bit messed up, but it means if it's a get at the end, then it's bad. Let's get at the end, of course, then you know, then she of course remains unfit for Kohanim. Okay, halachava. Mavgarish Isha. Someone divorces a woman, vichzira, and takes her back. Muteres liyavam. It's an interesting thing. There was a period in which she was a grusha, and a grusha, of course, is forbidden to a brother-in-law, right? But that doesn't forever. Is that clear? If a man divorces his wife, right? So her brother, his brother can never marry this woman, no matter what. Okay, even after the ex-husband dies, because she was an Esha Sachib. At one point, she was married to his brother, right? Okay. So what happens in this case? She was married to his brother, got divorced for a short period of time, was taken back by the brother, and then the brother died. Can she be Messiah Bemis? So Tanakama says yes. Rabbi Lezer Oser. Rabbi Lezer says it's forbidden, and we're going to discuss it. Somebody divorced a Yisoma, even though she was married only to Rabbanan, right? It's about where her brother or her mother married her off, or herself married her off. So she married a Yisoma. He divorced the Yisoma, Vichzira, and took her back afterwards. Muteres Yom, she's allowed to the Yavam. Rabbi Lezer Oser, here it's of course the Rabbanan. Ketana Shisi Aviyavnis Garsha. A Ketana was married off by her father, and she was divorced. It's as if she's a orphan, even though her father's still alive. And the same idea, if she gets remarried, she is forbidden to go to the Yavam, according to Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer, 1 point. If she was married off by her father and divorced, and then she got remarried to the same guy as a minor, so her first marriage is Doraisa, and therefore first divorce is Doraisa, and the second marriage is only Rabbanan, because the father only gets a one-time deal to marry her off, and therefore the second marriage is only the Rabbanan, right? So in that case they concede that she can't, if when her husband dies, she cannot be Misiah Bemis. Mivnei Shohayu Gerusha Gerushin Gemurin. When she got divorced, that was a true and complete divorce. But her return was not a valid return because it's only the Rabbanan. About the other way, in Girsha Ktana, she got divorced when she was a child. And he takes her back when she's an adult, which of course is without marriage. Or Shagilo Tachtav, or they grow up together until the husband kicks the bucket. So then Muteres Liyavam, then she's permitted to the brother-in-law as a Yavama. My time, Rabbi Lezer. What's the logic of Rabbi Lezer? That she's forbidden because there was a divorce, even temporary. Because at that one time, for that time she was a divorcee, she was usher to her brother-in-law, and that isser remains stuck to her like a pagam forever. Right? Now, Chachamim consider Rabbi Lezer when she was a child married off by her father, and she was divorced, that then she becomes like. Okay, over caffeinated. So Kiddushay v'Gerushay Torah, for Kiddushay Gerushin are Doraisa. Chazaros ain't a Torah taking back is not Doraisa. It's basically repeating the Mishnah. Now here it gets a little bit more complicated. Tzarasamo. What about her co-wife? Now this is a trick Gemara. You'll see in a minute. If she's also, so her co-wife is also right? Tzara Serva, right? If this woman who was divorced, of course, according to Rabbi Lezer primarily, but you're calling Rabbanan by a Yisayim B'chai Avia, a case where she was married by a father, divorced, and then remarried as a Ketana, right? So she never, with the second marriage was not a true marriage. But anyway, so what about the Tzara? What about the co-wife? Can the co-wife be Misiah Bemis? So the Chor not, right? Certainly according to Rabbi Lezer. So it says Rabbi Rav Amar Tzaras Asura. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Tzaras Asura. Shem Lakish Amar Tzaras Muteres. Shem Lakish says the Tzara is permitted. Amar Lezer said Chazarti. I checked out Ben Rabbanan Da'achad, the rabbis in Eretz Yisrael. Ben Rabbanan Da'achad, the rabbis in Bavel. Lashchiz Bar Nashkal Galsi. I couldn't find anybody who could hold like me. This is Rabbi Lezer Amora speaking. Lezer Ben Batas, not Rabbi Lezer Tana. I couldn't find anybody who hold like me. El Rabbi Shimon Ben Lakish, Sefer Rabbi Shimon Ben Lakish. Duamar Tzaras Muteres. I hold that Tzara is mutter. And what it's going to explain. Rav Yinun Rav Yosef Kami Rav Adar Bar Chua. Rav Yinun was sitting in front of Rav Adar Bar Chua. Amar Tzara Samai said, what's the status of the co-wife? Let's skip one line because the carbonated and Rabaz take it out. Amar Rava Bar Memel, you see that? Mistabra Command Amar Tzara Mutar. So it makes sense to say like Rish Lakish. That the co-wife is mutter. Says Limbara, Baram Command Amar Tzara Asura. According to opinion that the Torah is also, it makes no sense. No matter what, should be muteris. Now this is cool. This is really cool. I don't know if I can explain it properly, but it said when it said tzach. Why is it Torah muter? Always co-wives are also. It says tzach to me manavshach. No matter what, catch 22 leheter here. Why is that? Tzach kanaba. If he's really married, fully married again to wife A. So then, wife B is mutter because they're both equal co-wives. And he could do yibum to either one. If he's not fully married to wife A, why? Because she was divorced for a certain period in the middle. But that period of divorce, in and of itself, should not be impediment for wife B. On the contrary, if the period of divorce means there was a period when there was no wife A, meaning that it's a period for when there was no tzara. So since the period is no tzara, so of course that period should not answer the co-wife. Does anybody understand what I said? No? This is so beautiful. Whoever wrote this so beautifully. I'm looking right on the board. You have here, I'm going to try and do this on the board. You have here you had here marriage, right? The line is marriage, right? Mm-hmm. You had a divorce, and then a remarriage, and then the death, right? Mm-hmm. There was a co-wife, and there's a co-wife. It's not material really how long she was married, but let's say she was married the whole time, right? So the question is, this wife, who was divorced in the middle, is she a candidate for Yibum after her husband dies? And the Gemara says, according to Rebbe Lezer, she's not, right? Because this period in which she was forbidden to marry the husband's brother, right? Even though later on she seems to have rectified by getting remarried, that remains, and she's also be Yibum. But the co-wife, says the Gemara, no matter what, she should be muteris. Because there's no segment of time which makes her usher. Why is that? Because this is not like Tzoras Erva. Why is it not like Tzoras Erva? Because these segments, when they were just plain co-wives, that's not a problem, right? When the two co-wives, one could do Yibum. So what? This segment, when they were this which made this one usher, should make this one usher as well? Why? On the contrary, during the segment, she was also mutter, because then she wasn't even a co-wife. She was just the wife. She was just the only wife. So there's no segment in the timeline which answers her. In a classic Tzoras Erva case, you have one of the women is related in some prohibited way to the other, and that point, for all those points in the timeline, she answers the other co-wife. But here, in a timeline sense, there's no time that in a long timeline which should answer the second wife.
The only time would be answered if the Tzara was also a sister to the first wife.
Right, of course, but that's not here. Not related, yeah. So you understand that here, where it's timeline related, the Gemara says there shouldn't be a problem, no matter what, she should be mutter, because there's no time in the history of these marriages when there's any time when she would have been usher, when she should have been logically usher, because either she's a regular wife, regular co-wife, which is okay, or she's the only wife, which is definitely okay. So what's going to make it usher? That's what the Gemara is saying. Okay.
Let's put the 2 lines.
Okay, that's right. So again, let's see inside Manavshach. Tzach Konabo, on the side that they're both co-wives, Kenegdo Hitibitaraso, so they're both, at that point, the co-wife is mutter. V'tzach Lo Keneg Konaba, at a time when there was no second wife, because there was an interim divorce period, Kenegdo Hitibitaraso mutter then. So the one that's talking a good point. Rabbi Shem rejected it. He says, do you say catch 22 ba'arayas? You don't never say that. In other words, it's really like we had this morning in Chagiga, right? That Chatzi Even Chatzi Ben Chorin, according to Mishnah Rishonim, according to the Rambam, it's not to be regarded as two halves. It's a fusion which has its own entity, right? And here too, you can't look at it as a segmented timeline. You have to look at the wife with the segmented line as if she has a fusion of the Gerushin and the Suin, and therefore she becomes a new gather like an Erva. Okay, that's what it says. It's not the same logic which can unpack segments of time which you want to use. Rather, there's no manav shach. Everything becomes jumbled together, which is the problem. My kadon, and that's in fact the conclusion. What's the conclusion? Kol Yevamos she'ein kulo lachutz. If the Yevamos is not completely out because she got remarried again, sarakone sheba nido mishum erva. The fact that she is now reacquired, but at the same time at a time when she wasn't acquired, that makes her as if she's an erva, the erva poteres sarasa, and therefore, in fact, in this case, neither of the co-wives can go yibum, and we will stop here for this evening. Actually, the next Gemara, a 9 Gemara base, even though the Korban Aida takes out the whole next Gemara till the Mishnah, so I really could start tomorrow night from the Mishnah. The Ridbaz says he tries to make work out, but I didn't have enough time. One more minute. So the Ridbaz said. It's not at 10:15. One more minute. So the Ridbaz says it's going after the next Mishnah. That's how he tries to make it work out. But I haven't figured out yet how exactly he wants to make it work out. I'll see tomorrow night if I want to read it or not. But in any event, it's certainly not on the previous Mishnah, so we'll stop here.